Welcome to the Bullseye Breakdown, the podcast where CEOs, founders, and leaders of industry break down big decisions, big wins, and big lessons. No fluff, just real talk. Let's get into it. This is the Bullseye Breakdown. Welcome back, folks. Today we're diving into a story that's all about innovation, resilience, and making the right moves when the stakes are high. I'm your host, Dustin Weaver, and joining me today is Dorian Ayres, the visionary behind DYLN, a company that's reimagining hydration by bringing hydrogen water on the go. Dorian's journey is packed with real-world lessons, from scaling a business and navigating partnerships to making tough calls like buying out an investor and deciding when to pivot. If you're an entrepreneur, founder, or just someone who wants to hear about what it takes to grow something from the ground up, this episode is for you. We're talking branding, product, innovation, scaling strategies, and the reality of B2B versus D2C. No fluff, just real honest insights. So grab your water bottle, maybe even a DYLN, and let's get into it. Dorian, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Dustin, for having me.
I am excited for this opportunity. I'm excited to hear about your story. First of all, bringing technology into water is something that I think has gained a lot of traction over the past few years, but it's definitely an interesting space. How did you decide, like, this is what I want to do?
Sure. So the backstory and how I fell into learning a lot about water and the mystery of water and eventually developing a water bottle company, an innovative one at that, was a personal tragedy. So I lost my younger brother Dylan many years ago in just a very bad accident where I was the driver on the way up to Mammoth Mountain. And following his passing, I dealt with a lot of grief, just trauma, and developed some physical pain with all, probably as a result of all the emotional pain that I was dealing with at the time. And like most people, you go the typical route, like, you go see a psychiatrist, you possibly get prescribed some medication and things like that, and which happened in my case. And shortly after that, I realized this wasn't a way I wouldn't be able to heal by just going this typical route. So I started searching and finding alternatives, everything from going to Henry's at the time, which is now Sprouts, and going down there, the supplement aisle, seeking out alternative practitioners, alternative doctors. Just really was in this mode where I was just trying to search and find natural ways to heal and get better, because I knew that the typical way that a lot of people go through, a lot of it out of just persuasion and just not knowing that there's alternatives, was just gonna be the solution. And along that journey, I met some great people that introduced me to ways to detox. And one of those ways to detox and just to kind of the foundation of health was water, but not all water is created equal. So, I learned that certain minerals, when interacted with water, can change the molecular structure of water and how that can benefit our bodies. So I just opened up my eyes to this whole other world. And so I grew up in a family of builders, real estate, right? And so my dad is always built, my grandfather, my great grandfather, my uncles, right? So I grew up in this culture and this family of builders. So I knew from an early on that I wanted to build something. Right. I always thought it would be buildings or something related to real estate. But when I fell into this world of wellness and hydration, an opportunity came up to build a product, right? A hydration product where we can incorporate certain minerals in like a hard format, right? Like a solid format versus like drops or powders, right? That most people are very familiar with, right? With Liquid IV and all those hydration products that are out now. And then at the time, there were more drops, or you had to, buy spring water or those fancy water machines. Minerals from the earth, right, like magnesium, can be put into like a solid format, right? So I wanted to figure out how to get these mineral beads that I had developed into the bottom of a bottle, where it's just there attached to the bottom of the bottle, right? where the water's always interacting with it. So that
So
was
it's constantly touching it.
it's constantly
Because
touching. Yeah,
what you were stating there previously is because it's in a solid format, it's still going to interact with water in order to
correct.
facilitate that molecular change.
And that's what makes the Dylan bottle so different, right? Is where the goal was to create something that was super simple, that was no different than a container, a bottle that's been out for however long we've been out, right? It's just, the definition of a container is kind of like an opening at the top, right? And then now most bottles are made out of, metal or insulated and things like that. So I didn't want to reinvent the container, the design of the container, because it works really well, right? But I wanted it to do a lot more than just contain liquids, contain water. And I didn't want the customer have to do anything or even think about it, right? So just a really simple, easy solution. And so figured out a way how to get to this little cartridge, which we call the diffuser, attached to the bottom of the bottle. Right? But the next challenge was, how do I get this cartridge to go in and out of the bottle, right? Because you can't literally physically put your hand in the bottle. So I had
Literally was just thinking about like trying to stick my fingers into the bottom of a water bottle.
exactly. So I had to develop a tool that was small enough to fit inside the bottle. That way, when I ship and sell the bottle, sell and ship the bottle, that it comes in the packaging, like the bottle is the packaging, but also long enough to go in and out of the bottle to grab the diffuser. And so I developed this 3-part Lego piece type of tool that you can put together to go in and grab it and remove it. And so we have patents on that. We have patents on attaching this cartridge to the bottom of the bottle. That's really what makes the Dylan bottle unique. Up until this point, there's been nothing like it, right? Like there's still nothing like it because we hold many patents on that. So we were
Smart
talking.
business right there.
Yep. We were talking shortly before the show, like, how did I get into manufacturing? And ultimately, it's just, I think it's the culture that I grew up in, right? Where this family of builders. And so I always knew I wanted to build something. I didn't quite think it would be bottles, or even, before bottles, I actually got into apparel. So I developed a whole women's activewear collection. And that's really, when I was developing that line, that's how, I thought, I was like, okay, I got to go to Asia, right? It's where all the manufacturing's done. And so at the time, I was looking for a designer, an apparel designer. I found an ex-ASICS designer, and I told him like, "Hey, I'm going to China in a couple weeks. Can you come with me? Can you like show me around?" And he's like, "Oh, well, you got to go to Taiwan." I go, "Okay, we're going to Taiwan then," right? Because a lot of the activewear, at least at the time, happened in Taiwan. And so we went there, and then eventually I went on my own to China, and through some connections that I had made prior to the trip, and started touring water bottle suppliers, right? So I knew that like if I was going to get into this world, I had to just go to where it happens, right? And currently all the water bottle manufacturing happens in China. We'll see what happens with all the changes now, but some of it's going to be shifting to India over the next couple of years, and possibly elsewhere. But 99.9% of the manufacturing still happens in China for stainless steel insulated water bottles. And so yeah, that's kind of how I fell into it. Fell into this industry.
So you talked about a couple different things here, and I have kind of experience working in manufacturing. So I wanted to hit on some things because I want our listeners to really comprehend the massive mountain that you walked up. Not only were you designing something and you weren't trying to re-envision or redesign the wheel, reinvent the wheel, you were trying to create a better mousetrap. That alone is a very ostentatious expedition in itself. In addition to that, you had 3 total elements. You had the bottle, you have the cartridge, and then you have the tool to replace it. Designing and manufacturing one of those elements alone is very difficult, let alone trying to find somebody in another part of the world to do all 3 of those at the same time. The other major piece here is that the minute that you take your product and your designs and you release that information to the other side of the world, you lose complete control over it. You never know who's going to see it. You never know what's going to go on with it. And that is absolutely nerve-wracking for anybody that is trying to create a product with any sort of ingenuity, that you automatically think that, okay, I'm going to lose some sort of edge on the market by doing this because there are people that are going to try and recreate it. Was that an issue for you when you were first going over and trying to decide who to work with?
I think you kind of answered it indirectly already, right? When you said like, I had to develop the bottle, right? With the ability to attach something to the bottom of the bottle, the diffuser, the tool, and all that. So when you combine all that together, it honestly makes it a very difficult product to replicate.
Interesting.
And so, but to answer your question, so that's one component, right? It was so different, and it's not cheap to develop. It's not cheap to produce. Another thing too is I did go the legal route, right? I filed all of our patents in the U.S. Everything that we patented in the U.S., I would file in China. So at least we're covered there. Obviously, that only gives you some kind of formal protection, but not necessarily actual protection. But at least I wanted to have that covered. So I invested quite a bit in the beginning in IP. But then, I did take some extra steps, I guess, of protection in separating some of the supply chains. So factory A didn't know who factory B was, and factory C was involved, and nobody even knew they even existed, type of thing, or where it came from, type of thing.
Right.
So I would do those things over time. You build trust and loyalty and respect and all those things. And so that doesn't become as much of an issue, but you always have to kind of, I was careful. I was very careful in the beginning and very protective, to be honest, right? But now a bit less so, just because I've built up, really good relationships with within our supply chain.
Well, and that is a very good point too, because ultimately, once you develop the relationship, there is a lot of competition in that space, and so there is a need for development of that trust and that relationship. My experience has been that the people that I have worked with outside of the country are now quite close friends of mine, because they want to, one, make sure that you are not feeling any sort of fear or trepidation about allowing them to do their job. And by and large, when you develop that trust, you can come together on a better product at the end, because you're allowing that partner to do what they do best.
100%. Another thing is that you also have to have some faith as well, not just trust. I think faith is an important part of it, because sometimes you want to protect things at all costs, and I did that for a little bit, versus like, okay, I'm going to have some faith in this other supplier, right? That's a newer supplier. I have less trust in them, but it can really improve our supply chain and reduce our costs, right? So there's a big faith factor as well that sometimes needs to have a part.
Yeah. Well, and when you do give that faith, you give the opportunity for that partner to succeed. Otherwise, you don't have the ability to micromanage them anyway, because
Exactly.
of time differences and location constraints. And it gets real expensive to fly to China every month to, make sure that you're putting your hands on the process. I see what you're saying. It's a requirement, and it's one of those things that having that faith will allow the eventual outcome of the project to flourish even further.
Exactly.
Well, that gives us an opportunity to kind of move into a section of the podcast that I like to call the pressure test. In this process, has there been any moments that you just really had to step back and say, all right, I'm gonna let this roll the way that it's gonna roll? Or did you take a step back and say, I'm not gonna do this. I'm gonna change the way we're directing. We're gonna pivot.
A bit of both, right? So I think in 2019 we brought on our first big investor, and then we ended up having subsequent rounds with the same investor, due to just terms and things where it was difficult to raise outside capital other than our main investors. So I think that was I mean, everything since the beginning of my journey was a huge learning process, but this was like, a bit foreign for me at the time, dealing with a larger investment than just a smaller seed round from years prior, right? And dealing with really, really high expectations set up from the very beginning, right? That was the beginning of the relationship, was like, super high expectations. And this is not, this is very similar to a lot of other businesses that take on capital. Right? Especially if there's expectations in the beginning and then you don't meet them, or there's market factors and all sorts of things. So that was, I think, a situation where I had to do a little bit of both, right? I had to try to, you know, reach those expectations. And then when things didn't go right, yeah, I kind of had to pivot, and then kind of just take a step back and see how things played out, and kind of trust that things are gonna, somewhat work out when they weren't quite working out, right? I know I'm being a little bit vague, but like,
No, I think that's okay, and that actually leads into my next question is, like, was there in that process, was there ever a moment that you were sitting there thinking like, "Man, we're not gonna do it. We're not gonna make it. This isn't gonna work."
oh, yeah, yeah, dozens of times, absolutely, and then things kind of always, I think that's where again, the faith kind of comes back in, and I've learned that over the years, is like, if you just continue getting up and getting after it, and then just also learning how to dive in, or just take a step back and not let you know uh, certain things that aren't maybe going as well take over, right? Then there's a much better chance that things kind of continue to move forward and improve and all of that. And so there was a lot of that. Uh, and ultimately things didn't work out with the investor, and so there was kind of a pivotal. Actually, the last year I had to take a step back, a huge step back. And so that was one of the things that were like, I mean, I was basically forced to take a step back, and then the investor had, decided to put in another CEO, and so I was no longer even I was no longer the
Exciting.
CEO. So I literally had to take a step back and just like, all right, well, it is what it is. I've kind of lost control, got severely diluted, and there's I'm gonna just play it out and see what happens, right? And there was, the investor wanted out. He was potentially gonna just sell the entire company, and I easily could have lost everything, including all the other investors. And I had a small personal liquidity event, so I had a little bit of cash, and so I was like, let me offer him something, right? And I did, and he took it. So I ended up basically, buying him out, and then regaining control of the company. And then after that was probably the biggest pivot in the history of DYLN, right? So it was like, okay, we're going to go from, where we did have some high growth years during that time, but also just not profitable, right? Like so many other companies where they brought in money, and it was just, so I was like, okay, it's going to be profit first from now on, right? And I'm not gonna look at, or be obsessed with top line revenue, but it's just, so that was, and I had to unravel quite a bit personally and in the business. That was by far the biggest shift in the company, was post buying out the lead investor.
I'm sure hindsight is 2020, but in the time when you were asked to take that step back as a CEO, I'm sure that hit hard. Do you feel that taking that opportunity to take a step back gave you the forethought? Gosh, I'm sorry. Do you feel that taking that opportunity to take a step back gave you the vision in order to make that pivot? And when you were talking about removing your thought process of just top line revenue and bringing it back down and focusing on profit?
Yes, I think it was, it was quite a bit. I felt quite a bit during that process, right? And so I think it set me up for what was, what was coming up, I guess. Yeah, it was one of those things where I had no control. Even though I was in the background, still somewhat keeping the company, keeping it together, right? And making sure because I knew, I guess I knew in the back of my head, like this was not sustainable at all, right? So something was going to give in the near future, right? I wasn't exactly sure how it was going to play out. Maybe the company would get sold. They'd keep me on in some capacity. So like I knew that there would be some sort of big transition that would happen. I just wasn't quite sure what that would look like. Right? So, didn't even, that year at least, I didn't think I would be buying them out. Right. But that was just something that was like, okay, you know, um, this is an opportunity that I just have to take, for
You
me,
have to.
for others, and I product. I love the brand, and it's like, uh, there's so much, and there's so much more that I want to do with it as well, right? So that was the driving force.
So cut to you buy it out. Now you're back in the driver's seat. You're running the show and realizing that things have to change for this to actually be a successful company. Let's talk about some scaling secrets. Immediately, you automatically said, all right, we got to stop focusing on top line revenue. We got to really focus on profit. What did it look like to get from that point to where you knew that you were going to be able to start pushing and making those profits?
It all started with OPEX, right? Just like taking a look at every single line item on our P&L, like, to the penny. And I almost now wish that I had done that even sooner and even been more aggressive. I think sometimes, yeah, you can get too aggressive, but I kind of wish that I was even more aggressive. I think I did it maybe even a bit too gradual. And it would have been nice to just like deep, deep, deep. But again, it was this process of unraveling, right? But it all started with just looking at every single line item that we were spending and started cutting. One big shift that happened in the last year and a half is that, we had a big retailer, Sprouts Farmers Market, that, we did really well in. But it caused a lot of supply chain or just inventory issues, right? Because we had to, literally divert a lot of inventory from our main channel, right, D2C and Amazon, over to Sprouts. And oftentimes they would, place an order, you know, f- fairly late in, like, um, later than I would prefer. And then they would even come back often and just, here, we want more inventory. We're going to add more stores. So it's like, you don't want to say no to that. And so I decided to just, we would kind of pivot away from B2B, at least temporarily, and really focus and hone in. I see the bullseye in the back there on D2C and Amazon, right? And really get that to be, profitable, stable, really work on our supply chain and how we order, when we order, how much we order, because that directly, is probably the biggest effect on cash flow. And then once we get that in a good place, then we'll start to add B2B back, but in a more, maybe start smaller type of thing. So we're still in that phase, but that was another big thing, was just because we were placing these big orders sometimes, and that would just throw things off, and then we have to divert the inventory. And then if we ever run out of, if any Amazon sellers out there know that if you run out of inventory at FBA, Amazon, it can take a long time to build back up. And that happened to us, once or twice, right? Or we, at one point we lost all of our subscribers because we ran out of inventory on our Diffuser subscription product. So it took a while to kind of get in a much better rhythm where we're at now, right? Where it's just like much smaller shipments, but more frequent shipments, smaller POs, and have just a, much higher velocity even than before. So it's, it's a process of kind of things that I wish I knew before, but even though I've been at this for quite some time, but just, it's like always, being open to relearning.
Yeah, that's having been in a scenario where I've sold to large chain stores like that. When you decided to pull back out of that, was there any sort of internalization of maybe of regret or feeling like you may have failed at that? Or was that something that you made a decision on that you knew was the right thing for the company?
Yes and no. And not all of it was purely like my decision. Some of it was circumstantial, right? Like some of it was just, it kind of happened. Like we couldn't make a couple shipments, but it wasn't like, that sucks, but there is a silver lining to it, right? And so I kind of took that approach. It's like, okay, well, maybe this is going to be maybe for the better, right? At least for now. And so again, part of it was decisions that we made internally. Part of it was just, not being able to hit deadlines. But that was the problem that we were facing, is that, these deadlines were just kind of, very difficult to meet. And we did everything we could in the past to meet them. That led to a lot of consequences. And so we just decided, all right, we can't meet them, and we're just not going to meet them, and that's that. And that's going to be part of this transition away from B2B, at least temporarily.
Well, and I think honestly, like when you talk about the two entities or the two different verticals, whether it's B2B or D2C, you have a profit margin difference in those two verticals. And when you're talking about having to shift the majority of your inventory into going over into a B2B platform, you're adding another link in the chain of how long it actually takes to get to the consumer, and so thereby your margin's going to drop. I think it's brilliant. I think it's pragmatic. I think it's a very intelligent move to ensure that foundation of Amazon is there, knowing how long it takes to manufacture something and then how long it takes to ship to you, and if there's any sort of shipping delays. If you are set at a cash flow run of manufacturing and knowing that you have over the next 6 months an estimate of X amount of inventory coming through, and then all of a sudden you get an order that you feel in your heart of heart that you have to fulfill, but it's maybe going to actually lower your profit margin by a third or more by doing that. I can see that silver lining very clearly, and it makes complete sense to me. And that's really what I was kind of wanting to get at is making sure that silver lining was one of the things that was top of mind for you, because it's a genius way to scale. We talk
Yeah,
about, oh,
it opens up a lot of capacity, right? It's like,
yes.
you could only focus on so many things. So it was like, oh, okay. It was like, it was a relief somewhat, of like, okay, now because yeah, we had some sales people, agencies, all external, like third party, but still it was like, okay, we're gonna get rid of them. We're not gonna have to deal with that whole other side of the business of dealing with B2B. On the other side of it too, it's now, like, I can't wait to get back into it, right?
Mhm.
Because once we've really cleaned up the P&L, we brought costs down a ton. And so now it's like when we do get a B2B order, which is we still get a little bit, but more it's just like inbound lead type of stuff. It's just pure profit. Now that's why I am excited to get back into it, but just also in a different way than we did previously.
Yeah. Yeah, it's hard putting inventory on shelves in large chain stores. It's
Yeah.
a strain on every part of the business.
Mm-hmm.
100%. I
Mm-hmm.
get it.
Yep.
Well, that's an excellent way to look at it. What other scaling tactics are you guys using aside from building that foundation with Amazon?
Yeah, so something that we've always been reliant on since day one. We actually, I started the company through Kickstarter, and with Kickstarter, we ran Facebook ads worldwide, because Kickstarter is a kind of a worldwide community of backers. And so since day one, we've always been running Facebook ads. We've been heavily reliant on Facebook ads, still are. And so that is another thing that I want to be less reliant on going forward. So right now we're experimenting with TikTok Shop. And so we kind of have a good system in place right now with some help of an advisor, and shout out to Jordan West, who's helping us out with that. And so that's a whole new world for us. We dabbled with the influencer, Instagram kind of influencers and all that, and we still are. But this is something that we're testing out. So still in the very, very early phases. We're sending out samples just about every day, and hopefully we'll start seeing some returns shortly. I've heard there's a ton of success stories and kind of the halo effect that it can have on Amazon and D2C. Difficult to attribute, but it's most likely there, right? So that's another area that we're looking to dive into, learn more, and hopefully that can be a channel. And maybe not just TikTok, but as like there's more like kind of social commerce that you're seeing on all these other channels that TikTok, really essentially started. We'll see if those are viable as well.
It's crazy how fast that is really just jumping up the chains in terms of the amount of money that's getting put into TikTok Shop by consumers. You see these metrics and it's just unreal. It is 100% kind of turning that whole model on its head. And I think that you guys will do very, very well on there. The interesting thing about TikTok Shop is you not only have a specific place that you can sell, but you can run affiliate opportunities with everybody on the platform. If
Yep.
anybody, links to your product, they can help you sell your product. And I tell you what, everybody's linking to products right now. It's unreal. And so just forward thinking by that program, to your point, it's spawned off a lot of others like Whatnot and places, of that ilk, I guess you'd say. That's maybe not a bad way to say it. It spawned off things like Whatnot and other competitors. Looking into how that actually is going to affect your day-to-day life, it will be interesting because the thing about TikTok Shop is it's basically the same premise as the way that Amazon works. So you have that foundation that you've built out and you can just kind of slowly expand that. But that expansion can be exponential because as you said, the halo effect that is there that nobody can put their finger on, but it's getting the traction. And I think it's amazing to take a run at that. And
Yeah,
especially
it's actually been fun because it's something so different. Like, all the other channels, like I'm just, I've been around them for so long now, but TikTok Shop is so different. The TikTok Shop, creator affiliate is so different as well. Like, from like your typical Instagram influencer type of thing, right? Like it's just like they have a page honestly just dedicated to promoting products, and they'll promote anything and everything. Typically they'll have some sort of niche. Some of them do, some of them don't though. And it's kind of wild, right? And so we're starting to get videos in, and then now we're going to put a small ad budget behind those to, invigorate the algorithm kind of thing, right? And see if we can get some traction there. And what we recently did is we actually increased the price of our bottle. That way we have more wiggle room on offering a discount, right? And so that's something that's important with TikTok Shop. So before we did that, one of our advisors, Jordan West, was, who runs one of the largest TikTok Shop agencies. He didn't quite recommend our product for TikTok Shop because it's not a cheap product. You have to ship it, you have to pay the commission, you have to pay TikTok. But once we increased the price of our bottle pretty substantially, we were then able to offer a discount on it and still have enough margin, left over after we're paying shipping and TikTok and the affiliates. So that's been a big shift too, and something we're kind of testing out. It happened all at the same time with the tariff increases too. So that's also works out for us. And then we have another new product that we're going to be launching probably sometime in Q2, late Q2, which will be a universal diffuser, right? So this universal diffuser, you'll be able to add to any bottle, right? So you don't necessarily need a DYLN bottle, right? I still think the DYLN bottle is going to be the best experience, the best solution, the best quality bottle too, because we're one of the only bottles that uses surgical grade 316 stainless steel on the inside of the bottle. So it's literally the highest quality water bottle that you can buy in the US. But this new product is universal in nature. So you can add it to any cup, container, pitcher, water bottle, right? It's going to be smaller volume, so you'll have to replace it more often. And, it's going to allow us to really expand to a much larger market, right? A much larger audience because it's going to have a lower price point. You won't need to buy a bottle. You can use your existing one. You know, we're a really good water bottle company, but we don't have all the sizes. We don't have all the accessories, right? You know, we're not a huge company to where we can, you know, launch new colors every week or every month type of thing, right? So we'll see how that goes. And that will be obviously a great TikTok shop product.
Sure.
So I'm very, very excited about that. Great Amazon product too.
I see that blowing up on TikTok Shop.
Yeah, yeah. I have trying to manage my expectations, but I think it's exciting because it's honestly a product that I've kind of always had in the back of my mind, but I really wanted call it maybe some pride, right? Pride in my bottle type of thing. And so this was also a kind of stepping back, going back to that, you know, have I ever had to take a step back? And this is one of those moments. And so we actually developed this product for you know, kind of a funny story for a carpet cleaning distributor because a friend, you know, e-com friend of mine bought a bunch of our bottles and started testing our diffuser that he had a couple extra in his carpet cleaning solution for professionals. And he realized that the increase in the pH resulted in he didn't need as many chemicals to clean the carpet. So it basically made the solution more effective with less chemicals. And so ended up developing the product initially for him. And so that's how kind of all this, you know, came about. And then I was like, okay, I think I'm ready to launch a universal product, right? Diffuser hydration, you know, solution for anybody and everybody, you know, no matter without having to use the DYLN bottle.
I mean, it's so funny how innovation kind of just sparks from random places too. You know, obviously, I know that you said that that was kind of in the back of your mind anyway, but I mean, that's a whole nother vertical. I mean,
Oh yeah.
it's really a different company is what that is. You know, it's an opportunity to kind of think about that because I just sit there and I was like, well, what about throwing it in my washing machine? Can I throw it in my washing machine? What does it do for clothes? You know, like
Yeah, yeah. Obviously, I think the biggest market is going to be the hydration market,
sure, of
but
course.
100%. Like we were even testing it. I think we still are in some cafes, right, where they can put it in their espresso machines to improve the water to make better coffee. Espresso machines, especially, you know, high end 10, 20,000, you know, $30,000 units require a specific type of like mineral content in the water, right? And so we're experimenting with that, you know. So it's got a lot of different applications.
Well, that's a really good segue to take us into part of the podcast that I like to call the market edge. So in this section, we talk about kind of what's going on in the market and the technology trends and how they are transitioning and moving. We just talked about how your product has all these different variations. It's obviously cutting edge anyway, in sense of what it does. Where do you see the next kind of iteration of what the hydration product is working towards, and how does that affect you?
Sure. I mean, like we actually have some more direct competition now, whereas before we really didn't. And I'm actually excited about that. And that's the whole hydrogen water bottle market, right? That actually incorporates a lot more technology than our bottle. And the reason why is because our bottle creates hydrogen, alkaline, you know, super hydrating water naturally primarily through magnesium, elemental magnesium, just by allowing the water to interact with the minerals, right? So similar to spring water. But the hydrogen water bottle generators, if anybody's familiar with like the MLM company, you know, Kangen, or those expensive, you know, $3, $4, $5,000 ionizing machines, right? Water ionizers. So those actually require electronic components, plugging in, you know, they require electricity. And now you have those portable hydrogen water bottles, and those are blowing up. All right, you know, with people like Gary Brecka and also, you know, Andrew Huberman, and it's getting mentioned on Joe Rogan, you know, every 3 or 4 episodes. And so those water bottles that actually have been around since I developed my bottle, right? I've seen those bottles in China. They've been around for a long, long time, but hydrogen water has just started gaining steam and has become and it's really good. Hydrogen water is really, really, really great for health. And even though we've always been focused on alkaline water, right, our bottles always produced hydrogen water. And so we're shifting a lot of our marketing towards this hydrogen water kind of explosion that's happening right now in the health world.
So that's amazing. You have something that's popping off and something that is becoming a hot trend. It's something that your bottle already did. You never needed or had any reason to push that as kind of the forefront, because previously the biggest trend in terms of the alkalinity as the forefront of that.
Yep.
Now you just have an opportunity to pivot in your entire process or the way that you're going about it to market and kind of doing dual duty.
Yep.
That's amazing. That's
Yeah,
great.
and all these water bottles now, these hydrogen water bottles are doing a lot of marketing right around it, and they all look kind of the same. They all have an electronic component. They're usually glass or plastic. They're small in volume, right? Typically 8 to maybe 12 ounces, right? Our smallest bottle's 25 ounces, right? They're bulky, they're heavy, they require charging, they probably break often. And there's like dozens, getting added to Amazon probably every week of like new manufacturers or companies or and whatnot, right? And there's some innovation happening there. There's some better ones. There's some not so good ones. I
Some
think some
sharing of technology.
100%, right? Like 100%. I mean, and that technology again has been out since I developed my bottle years ago, right? So it's nothing new. Anybody can replicate it. But then you have our bottle, right? Where it's still unique and different. So we're the only one really doing it, where the diffuser can attach to the bottom of the bottle. And so it's in like a package system, right? And so now, we're really working to increase our rank, on Amazon. When you search hydrogen water bottle, we're shifting all of our images and content towards, the hydrogen water bottle or hydrogen water marketing, right? And keywords. And so that's something that, is going to be just a big push of ours. The new universal diffuser ball is going to be much more geared towards the hydrogen water market as well. And so that's something that's happening right now that we're really trying to, ride that wave. And I think that this wave is going to be even bigger than the whole alkaline water movement that happened over the last, really the last 15 years. And so we're just still at the beginning of this whole hydrogen water.
Yeah. Well, it's a good spot to be. It sounds like it's going to really take off and give you a lot of runway for all the products that you're bringing out to the table right now, which is phenomenal.
Yep.
Well, good. Well, let's move on to a section that I like to call the Bullseye Breakdown. Bullseye Breakdown is a space where we give you the opportunity to really talk about success stories for your product and an opportunity to really hone in on what problem your product actually solves. So that said, can you give us a success story and tell us exactly what your problem solves?
Sure. I mean, it's some of the success stories are like all over the board. We try to like not like, for instance, we have a lot of cancer patients that buy our bottle, right? But that's a very sensitive subject. You don't want to be like, oh, our bottle cures cancer. And we never say that. We never will say that. But like, doctors now are recommending to their patients, because they're on chemo or radiation and things like that, to drink alkaline water to counteract some of the negative side effects of some of those typical cancer treatments. And so, we have a lot of cancer patients that gravitate towards DYLN and buy our bottle, sometimes from doctors' recommendations, of general recommendations of drinking alkaline water. And so we've had a lot of success stories from cancer patients, at least helping them through their healing journey, or post treatment and all of that, and they notice a big impact in their overall health and well-being. We have other stories of skin clearing, right? That's again not something we really focus on or even tout, but people people say that helps them with that, right? And I think some of the simple, the simplest are my favorite, right? Where it's just people that have never really drank much water, so they rely on soda, they rely on sugary beverages, juice, energy drinks. Like they'll try our water from the DYLN bottle, and then they're like, "Oh my gosh, this is good water." And the reason why they have that reaction, and why so many of our customers have that reaction, is that the water that they've been drinking was just dead water, just like not good, not hydrating. Their bodies literally physically rejecting that water. Right. And that's like when everybody says like, oh, well, does alkaline water really work? There's all these, bad PR on it. I go, at the end of the day, it's all about hydration. Right? Our bodies want to feel hydrated, right? Water also helps with detoxification, right? Because we're just literally drinking and flushing out our system with water. And so that's what's most important, is just feeling hydrated. And your body will tell you, like you will know, right? When you know when you're dehydrated, and you know when you're hydrated. And drinking water from a restaurant, tap water at home even, most people know that they are not feeling hydrated from drinking that water. And then that's when they resort to other beverages, usually, that are full of junk, sucralose to corn syrup to dyes, food dyes, and all sorts of things, right? Or just a lot of sugar, even if it's natural sugar. But then they end up just drinking more water. And I think those are like the little wins of that I love hearing about the most.
It's awesome. And you started off this podcast talking about how you wanted an opportunity to feel better without putting things into your system that were supposedly helping you, but ultimately
oh no, yeah, I mean, I was at one time I was taking a drug called Seroquel, right? And if anybody knows what Seroquel is, it's probably one of the worst drugs out there. I was taking it for sleep. But it's typically prescribed, should be prescribed. I take it back. It shouldn't be prescribed to anybody, but it's like an antipsychotic, right? And so at the time, I was like, I had tried everything. So I was putting literally the worst things into my body because I was, recommended them. And so I went, I've now gone to a completely different direction to where, I've only taken some antibiotic ear drops for a couple ear infections, that I'll get here and there. And that's it. I haven't touched any medication or drug since then. And I don't want to. Like, I really put I have, two daughters now. And, some people at least used to look at us funny by all the things that we do and eat and all of that. Now I'm happy to say that it's becoming more commonplace to really care about what we're putting in our bodies and the clothes that we wear, right? I don't buy any plastic clothing. I haven't for a couple of years now. I won't for the rest of my life. I'm still trying to convert my wife. The whole yoga pants thing is hard to get away from for females, but I'm working on it. It's a work in progress. So it's all those little things. And so when I wanted to, I'm kind of a perfectionist, and I like good quality things and putting good things into my body. So I really put all of that into this bottle, into every product I create and will create. Right? I do selfishly develop it for myself.
Well, it's a phenomenal reason to selfishly develop something, because I know that it's helping so many Americans and so many people worldwide for that matter. Let's do this. Let's move to the takeaway shot. We've had a really good conversation today, and it's been a pleasure to be able to understand the reason why you do what you do and why DYLN is so important to you. If there was one thing that you could leave our listeners with, what would it be?
I mean, we've talked a lot about building, manufacturing, and things like that. I would, it's honestly probably one of the best feelings is to build something and create something. And it's also the biggest, like you said, one of the biggest risks and also one of the most challenging things. But for anybody that has that itch, I wouldn't think about it too much and go after it. It's I think every year and decade there's always a new challenge. There's a ton of challenges now, but there's also this thing called AI, right? So it could be, you can look at it as the most challenging time to start a business or create a product, or maybe one of the easiest times. And so, but I wouldn't think about it too much. I think I made that mistake in the beginning of making sure we had all the right branding and marketing, and spending too much money on things that honestly didn't really make a big difference. But I didn't really know better at the time. I'm actually starting a new business, just launched a new business with my wife, and it's just a coffee business. We're roasting super high quality, mold-free coffee actually out of our DYLN warehouse. We have a full coffee roasting operation. And then with DYLN, later this year, we're going to be launching a coffee and tea bottle, right? Where you'll be able to, pour over style your own coffee within the bottle, and it will work synergistically with the diffuser, which will enhance the water or enhance the coffee and tea to make the best cup of coffee all within your bottle, right? And then my kind of new side business with my wife, we have the highest quality organic mold-free coffee, which DYLN will also sell to DYLN's customers. So and with that business, it's been a lot of fun because I'm taking a lot of what I've learned and applying it to that business, right? So with that business, I'm just trying to, you just gotta go for it.
Yeah.
That's
I think the common thread in all those things, that what you just said there, is not being afraid to iterate, and
100%.
getting something out on the market is 1,000 times better than not.
Well, yeah.
You can always change. You can always update. Your first submission is not your last.
Yep. And your customers are going to give you the best feedback, right? They're going to be the ones that's going to tell you how to iterate and how to improve and what you need to focus on. And that's 90% of it. I mean, you can do all the R&D testing, internal testing that you want, right? But it's, you got to get it in people's hands, or, so that's the best way by far.
Couldn't have said it better. Well, Dorian, thank you so much for your time today. This has been a real pleasure. I appreciate you giving us a look into what has brought DYLN to where it is today. We're very excited about the future and all the new products that you're bringing out, and we look forward to having you back here and talking about coffee sometime in the future.
Yeah, of course. And I just do also want to mention we are raising capital for DYLN through WeFunder. So the link is wefunder.com/DYLN. It's a crowdfunding raise. So anybody could invest as little as $200. So this is something, completely new for us to open it up to the market. But I'm really excited about the opportunity to bring on, smaller retail investors and opening up to even our own customers. So just wanted to mention that.
I love that. Giving people an opportunity to back something they believe in is a genius move. And I definitely will make sure to link that in the show notes below, and then also go check it out myself. Aside from that, if people want to buy your product right now, Amazon is definitely going to be one of the best places. Are you live on TikTok Shop yet?
We are live on TikTok Shop. Yeah. So if you go to TikTok Shop and search, DYLN, DYLN bottle, you will find our bottle there. Make sure you buy it from our shop. There's I think we give it out to creators, and then they might list it on their own shop. So we're, again, navigating that. But yeah, we're live on TikTok Shop, or you can go to our website, dyln.co, and you can also purchase it there.
Awesome. Well, thank you again, and we really look forward to talking to you again soon.
Thank you, Dustin.
What a conversation. Big shout out to Dorian Ayres for joining us today and sharing some serious gems about entrepreneurial grind. From product innovation to the challenges of inventory management and knowing when to scale back before scaling up. This is the kind of insight you won't find in your typical business book. If you enjoyed today's episode, do me a favor, subscribe, leave a review, and share this with someone who's building something great. And hey, if you want to connect or have someone in mind who'd be a perfect guest, hit me up. Dorian, thanks again for keeping it real. You can check out DYLN's game-changing bottles at dyln.co or on Amazon or the TikTok Shop. And keep up with their latest innovations. Until next time, keep aiming for the bullseye, and I'll see you on the next Bullseye Breakdown.